Okay.
Hi, I'm Dina, and I want you to help me for doing an interview about British and literature. So can I have your name and your domicile?
My name is Grace.
Hi,
What was the
Grace.
second question? Hello.
Uh, which city you live or you stay at?
So I live in Birmingham, which is a city in the West Midlands. So instead of states, we have counties. So the West Midlands is one of the counties in
Oh,
England.
okay, in England. And what do you do now? You study or working?
So at the moment, I'm studying and working. So I'm doing something called an apprenticeship, which is a government scheme where you work and study at the same time. So I'm studying payroll and working at the same time at the moment.
Oh, that was so cool. You are so gorgeous. Okay, and uh, I want to ask about the traditions. Are there any tradition that carried out on a special day, like festival or some activity to celebrate it?
So a lot of British traditions are Christian traditions. So we'll celebrate Christmas, and then the day after that we'll celebrate Boxing Day, then we celebrate Easter. Then we have a few other traditions where everyone in the country will have the day off work. So we have May Day, which is the first Monday in May. Um, so those are the traditions we celebrate around the whole country. But then Britain is very multicultural, so we also have tradition of Eid was recently, so the country was decorated for that as well. So we have lots of traditions that we celebrate in Britain.
So you do what should I say? A Valentine too? Did you celebrate the Valentine?
Oh yeah, Valentine's Day. So every year we have Valentine's Day on the 14th of February, where couples will send each other cards or gifts. Sometimes people will send cards to their families as well. So when I was younger, my gran would send me a Valentine's Day card and she'd sign it from a question mark, so I wouldn't know who it was, but I knew that it was my gran. So we celebrate that as well every year.
Hmm. And as far as I know, there are several countries in the United Kingdom, and does each country have a different traditions, or they have the same traditions?
The traditions are different. So there's England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So one difference would be traditional dance. So
Mm.
in England, our traditional dance is Morris dancing. And then in Scotland, they have Scottish dancing. And then in Northern Ireland, they have Irish dancing, and they're all different styles of dance. So that's one thing that's different. But then for traditions like Christmas and Easter and Valentine's Day, we'll celebrate all of those together. So there are some
Oh,
differences as some similarities.
oh, okay, okay. And as far as I know, the British uh, really loves tea time. Did you still doing that in your home?
Yeah, so tea is very important to British people. Which is
Oh,
funny because tea isn't British. We can't grow tea here because the weather's not right. But we drink a lot of tea. We'll drink it in the morning. we'll drink it. When people come round, we'll always offer them tea. It's very strong cultural thing. Like if anything ever goes wrong, if we're ever celebrating anything, the first thing we'll do is make tea. So it's very important.
Okay. Did you still doing that on the morning or afternoon? Because when I search in the internet, they
Mhm.
said afternoon tea time too. So
So we also have a tradition called afternoon tea. So afternoon tea is a meal that's focused on tea. So you'll drink tea in the morning, and then in the afternoon you'll have afternoon tea, which is usually the drink tea, and then you'll have a cake stand that's like this with sandwiches on, cakes on, and you'll eat that, and that's your afternoon tea, the whole thing. It's really nice because you get to eat lots of food and have a whole pot of tea. So that's afternoon tea.
that was so cool. And and did they read a newspaper or did they read the news on an online platform?
So we still have newspapers that are printed every morning with the news headlines, but older people tend to read newspapers, and younger people like me, we read the news on our phones. So we'll still read the same newspapers, but on the internet
Mm.
instead, because it's easier, and newspapers are quite big and they're quite hard to read, and you have to go to the shop really early in the morning to buy them, so it's not as convenient anymore.
Oh, okay. So I will move the next question. I've
Okay.
heard that in Western culture, a person who has entered the age of 17 and above will move from his parents' house. Is that done by everyone or just the most of them?
So usually around 17, 18, people might move out of their house to go to university, and they'll live at university, but only students will do that. And then they'll do that for 3 years. So I moved out to go to university. I moved out for 3 years. But then because houses are quite expensive now, people tend to move back in with their parents again. So they do move
Mhm.
out, but they don't stay out of their parents' house unless they can afford to buy a house on their own.
Okay. And I have a questions about the immigrant. Have
Mhm.
you ever met an immigrant in your city, in your country?
I have. I think a lot of Britain is like the population is built from immigrants and immigration. Uh, my family are immigrants from Ireland. So I was born in Britain, but my grandparents were born in Ireland. And then also, I know people whose families have moved from India, from the Philippines, from China, people from all over the world come to Britain. So I know lots of immigrants. Yeah.
Okay. Um, have you ever see that they have a culture shock when they in your country, like because they have a different culture.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think people will have a culture shock just because it would be so different. Like, there were a lot of people in my school who had come from Poland, so they didn't speak the language, they didn't know our cultures and customs, but because there are so many immigrants from other countries, there are communities for people who move over to move into. So we do have like Polish shops, we have Chinese churches, and there's a whole street by me where all of the shops sell like Indian food and Indian clothes. So even though they would have a culture shock, the culture's very diverse. So they would still find things that they can recognize and relate to as well.
Okay. And I want to ask you about the literature right now.
Okay.
Do you interest in literature of or arts? Maybe do you have favorite novel, painting, music, poetry, or
So when we were in school, we'll learn about British culture. So we learned about British literature. Everyone will study Shakespeare at school and read his plays. So I had an exam on Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth. So everyone will have read those. And then British music, I think British people are very passionate about British music, because it's become well known all over the world, like the Beatles. Everyone will know the Beatles. Um, so I know about those, and we've got Shakespeare books in our house. We've got Beatles albums in our house. For art, I don't know as much British art. I'm not sure, because like a lot of the classical painters that I know are from other countries in Europe. So I'm sure there are British artists, but I couldn't tell you who they are.
okay. Let's move. Do you know the history of your country?
um, yes. So I will have learned British history in school. So we usually start learning about the kings and queens of England. So we'll learn about the Tudors first, King Henry VIII, and then Queen Victoria and the Victorian era. We'll all learn about that. And then more recent history, we tend to learn about British wars. Um, Everyone will have to learn about those as well. So I do know British history in general, I
In
would say.
general, about the kings and queens. Do you
Yeah.
have the opinion of the most influential kings or queen?
Um, I think at the minute I would say King Henry VIII, because he's on my mind. Because recently I saw a play about him and how because Britain is a Protestant country, so it's like a version of Christianity that isn't Catholic. And King Henry VIII was the one who set up that church, and that church still kind of influences our laws and things like that. So I think just because one king wanted to divorce his wife, the way that this country is completely changed. So I think that he would be quite influential, definitely.
Okay. Okay, we will go to the last question,
Okay.
please. In my country, we use presidential system,
Mm-hmm.
and in the UK, they have different system with my country. So, can you tell me about parliament and monarch roles for your country and the difference between them two?
Okay. So we have a monarchy and we have a prime minister. So the monarchy is just one family, everyone is born into it. At the minute, we have a king. So I nearly
Yeah,
said queen, but the queen died last year. So we have a king, and then he technically is in charge of parliament and the government, but he doesn't actually make any laws himself. So the prime minister and parliament will make all the laws, they'll make decisions about how the country is run, and then they will go to the king and he will say either, yes, you can make this law, you can make this change, or no, you can't. but the king would never say no. So he doesn't have any actual power over the country, only the government does, and we elect the government. So we vote for, what happens is we vote for a local politician in a party, a government party, and then the party with the most votes, they will be in charge and they will elect their prime minister. So it's quite complicated because there isn't just one structure, there's two separate ones. So I hope that makes sense.
Okay, this is my questions about when I go to the British. Do you have a recommendations place? Because we know how the beautiful United Kingdom. Oh yes, UK, because they have beautiful places. Can you have a recommendation for me if I go to the UK?
I think a lot of people go to London because it's got a bit of everything. There's lots to see. But I think it would be nice to go somewhere further up north, like the Lake District maybe, or even to Wales, because the scenery is really beautiful. Like London's not very pretty, it's not nice to look at. But in the Lake District and in Wales, there's lots of mountains, there's lots of lakes, there's lots of greenery, and it's really beautiful. And that kind of natural world is quite unique to Britain, like how green it is and how pretty it is. So I would recommend that, I think.
Okay, thank you. Uh, do you ever go to Indonesia, or do you have ever heard about Indonesia?
Um, I've never been to Indonesia, but I did learn about Indonesia when I was at school in geography. That was one of the countries we learned about. That was quite a long time ago now, so I probably can't remember very much. Um, and I'm sure I've met people from Indonesia. It would surprise me if I hadn't, because I've met people from all over the place. So probably have.
Okay, thank you. So we go to the last questions,
Okay.
and yeah, we should end these conversations and end this interview. And thanks for helping me, Grace. Nice to meet you. You're so kind
Nice to meet
and
you
you're so
too.
gracious.
It was
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
I will stop the recording right now.
Okay.
It's okay. I will stop this